I thank you very much for tuning in to the No Fruit Podcast. Our guest, he went from addiction, a near total loss, to serving as director of retail for Bose Corporation, building a national company as CEO, and writing a book that's quietly changing lives, one question at a time. So today's guest, Doug Fleener, he knows firsthand what it feels like to be in a completely unfruitful season. And more importantly, he discovered the two-word question that turned everything around, and we're about to find out if it can do the same for your marriage and your family. Let's talk about it right after this.
Let's talk about love and marriage the way that God intended. Life experience, here we share it. The No Fruit Podcast. Tuning from any platform. No Fruit Podcast. Will help your spirit transform.
So, our guest is a coach, author, speaker, and the creator of the What If Rule, a deceptively simple framework that helps people create immediate and practical change in the moments that matter most. He is the author of Start With What If and The Day Makes the Year. But before the books, before the keynote stages, and before the CEO title, he lived through some of his darkest unfruitful seasons, including a battle with addiction that nearly costed him everything. So some of us, we can deal with that. We understand that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we progress through this conversation. You know, on the No Fruit Podcast, we're not going to pull no punches. We're going to get right to the point. So, Doug, first of all, thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, no problem. So, before we get into the tools and the framework, I want to start with the raw story, right? The where was the season in your life where addiction had taken hold and things were falling apart? And when you look back at that season now, what does an unfruitful season actually feel like from the inside? And how long did it take for you to even recognize you were in an unfruitful season?
What a great question. Really love that framing. So, quite often, right, your unfruitful season starts to have, before you hit that season, you have all these kind of moments that start to add up. And you don't even realize at times you're heading towards that, and when it comes to me, right, my whole story is about addiction, alcoholism, and really a feeling of feeling less than to other people. And I didn't realize it for me, but that started happening like when I was about 11, 12 years old. That's when I started drinking and I started doing drugs. I had a single mother. She worked nights. I had two older brothers. So I grew up very fast. And somewhere very quickly, I learned that alcohol and drugs made me get to that place of comfort. But like so many things in life, right, the things we think are comforting us will eventually turn on us. And so I was through high school and then went to college. But when I got to college, it's when my drinking really took off. And I always joke I was going to college full time, working full time, and drinking full time, and something had to give, right?
Yeah.
So I dropped out of college because I had to keep drinking, and I needed the money
to pay for it.
Right, to drink.
Yeah.
And so I eventually ended up down in Florida. I went to business with my father. We owned a marine supply store. It was in the 80s during the Miami Vice days. And many of my clients were drug runners, smugglers, and I got to know many of them. And it was there that I got very heavy into an addiction to cocaine. And so I started stealing from the family business to support that habit. And eventually my father couldn't figure out why we had customers in the store, but never any money. And so he decided we better meet on a Monday morning. And so like any, grown adult, what do you do when the pressure gets tough? You run away. And so I took off because I didn't want to have that meeting. And it was there. This was really the start of that moment of, oh my gosh, I am in that unfruitful season. This is it. This could be the start of the end is really what it was. And I after a night of heavy drinking and drugs, it was a super Monday after a Super Bowl. And when you're kind of slowly waking up and trying to figure out where you are, all of a sudden I hear, we'll be landing in Houston International. I was in the center seat of an airplane from a blackout with no idea how I got there.
Wow.
And I put my hand in my pocket. There's a large amount of money. It's not my money. And it was that moment that I just kind of sat back in my seat and like, I can't live like this. What is my life like? And I had to go back and face my father. Longest air flight ever. I have flown to Australia, and I got faster than that flight felt back to go see my father. And I think, what I was able to kind of see is that when you're in these moments, when you're in this season, it's very easy to just miss really the reality of what's happening in your life. And so after I got back, I knew that I needed to do something. And so I went into a 12-step program. But one of the things that happened is I was so overwhelmed. I'd hurt so many people. Again, I'm very upfront. I was a liar. I was a thief. I just cared about myself. But when no longer I had the alcohol and drugs to mask that, to push those feelings down, I was just so overwhelmed, and I felt I had to change my life overnight. And life doesn't usually get to work that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love that saying. Somebody said to me once, however far I walk into the woods, that's how far I have to walk out of the woods. But I can also get help to walk faster out of those woods. And so I was overwhelmed one night with, I'm broke, I hurt my family, I've ruined every relationship. And this guy said to me, he says, well, what if today you just didn't drink and you didn't drug? It was as simple as that. And so what I've kind of come to see is that the season kind of stops when there's some kind of interruption, when our habits and our natural responses, when those are able to be interrupted and give us a moment to change our perspective and start to see some of the options that are available to us. And so that season of mine was probably about 17 years.
Right.
But what I was able to do was to be able to, on a daily basis, start to change my life. And my last book before this one was called The Day Makes a Year, Makes a Life. And it really was about how to grow and change on a daily basis.
I think there are some points that you made that I know that was just popping in my head. So there are some times where we're looking for the big bang, the epiphany, the light bulbs, all the lights going off in the city, whatever it might be, versus hearing someone just ask you a simple question. But what I'm getting at is, even in that simple question, if it was asked of you a little earlier, because at that time it sounds like you start to shift your mindset a little bit. But what happens if you were not ready to hear that question, or someone asked you that question and you were maybe deaf to that, moment? Because a lot of times while we're in it, we don't recognize that we're in an unfruitful season. So you have a pocket full of money. You're like, look, this is the most money I've ever seen in my life. Especially at one time. So sometimes you don't realize that you're unfruitful because of what looks like all the desired outcomes that you might have had in your life at one particular time. So you talked about your past, challenges in high school, challenges in college or whatever, the idea of being a failure or whatever it is. Well, you got this wad of money, you don't look like or feel like a failure. So what happens when that moment, if someone asks you that question a few moments before, maybe a few days before, maybe even a few years before that, where you were already searching, but you were already in the moment, do you think you would have recognized it?
Boy, that's a great point. And, the thing that really just pops into my head is that, there are often the voice we hear inside. And one of the things I would often hear my grandfather was a very well-known fire and brimstone preacher in the Midwest. And there'd be these moments where that what would pop into my head is how both unhappy my grandfather would feel for the life I was living and how much he would want to help me. But one of the things I think that's happened we're in those moments is we push those aside real fast because they're so uncomfortable. Someone wanted to ask me, well, didn't you see all these signposts along the way? And I'm like, oh yeah, and I ran them over. I just zoomed right through them.
Yeah.
You know? And so would I have been ready? You know, I often think of when we're going through an unfruitful season and things are getting harder and harder. I often picture it as falling into this deep hole and hitting a ledge. And you're on this ledge, and that ledge is a moment that you can either rise and start to look the other way, or what happened to me so often is I just rolled off that ledge and rolled deeper into the hole. And the thing is, we have, the very bottom of the hole is not a good place, right? I mean, it's where death can happen. It's where a lot of bad things can happen to us.
Right.
So but your thing is we have to be able to hear it, but so often, right, it's also how it's presented to us. And,
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of people, when they try to help us, they try to fix us.
Good point.
Yeah.
One of the things I like, because I've listened to your podcast and I love the conversations around marriage and relationships. And one of the things what I've learned is that most of us want to fix the other person. And instead, what I learned to do is just ask, what can I do? It's as simple as that. What can I do? And I think if you have someone in your life who is kind of maybe hitting those ledges, struggling a little bit, just ask them, what can I do for you? Rather than trying to fix them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, real quick, Kaf. I'm listening to what you're saying because to some degree we have seen it in our own children, right? Where especially our son has had some other challenges, right? And as a parent, yes, you want to fix it. You want to be there for them. You want to do whatever you can. But we also understand, especially as they've been going through it, there's some things they got to go through on their own, and you kind of need to let go. That's what I've had to learn as looking at my baby boy, right? You get what I mean? You want to make sure he's okay or whatever it is, but then there's another part where it's like, well, he's grown. There's some things that he's going to have to face. There might have to be that's one stop sign that he ran. It's going to come to a point that stop sign is going to bop him upside the head, So how do we understand to pull back of not wanting to fix and allowing that person to continually fall flat on their face, especially if you see all the signs? Because, I mean, for yourself, I see that you have some daughters. I'm pretty sure you don't want your baby girls to be going through this issue either. So how do you try to coach them through without being the overprotective over whatever it might be, so you could probably help them save themselves from themselves?
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned, and I learned this actually in coaching employees. One of the things I found is that if I tell you that you can do something better, what you hear is you're doing something wrong. You're messed up, right? And so it's so easy for people to get defensive. And especially, I think, right, when a parent is questioning a child. I remember when one of my daughters was young, we gave a bunch of the candy away to be shipped to the service people overseas.
Yeah.
But she hid a bunch of the candy. She didn't want to give it away. And so I walk into her room and she's not supposed to have any candy left, and her mouth has so much candy in it. It's like she's a chipmunk, right? And I go, is that candy in your mouth? She goes, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's right. So she's trying to deny it, even with the candy in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've learned is to answer, is to ask the question, is when we're working with anyone, our family, what have you, our children, is to base the questions on in the future.
Mm-hmm.
See, nobody can get defensive looking back. I mean, looking forward.
Forward, yeah.
We get defensive, right? So
Yeah.
we get defensive is, why did you do that? And, so just instead of why did you hit the signpost, let's talk about going forward, maybe what we can do. And it really creates just a whole new perspective in the conversation.
That's good. That's good. Some of the things that you've kind of hit on in the past of our conversation, drives home, like Maurice was saying, in reference to our own family, not only our kids, but our parents, because we're in the sandwich generation, where we're caring for our parents as well. And then as well as in our own relationship, of just how we communicate with one another. So again, just backpedaling a little bit into understanding when we're in something and being able to see the signs. It's so difficult when you're in it. It's much easier from the outside. Like, again, we're looking at our kids and we're like, yeah, you should be doing this. And we see it from the outside. I have to, a lot of times, take a step back and say, wait a minute, when I was 23 years old.
Right.
Right.
Wait. When I was 23.
Right.
Whoa.
And I'm not going to tell them the rest of that story.
Right.
Sometimes I do, though, so that they can see the signs, because it may not be them, but it may be a friend of theirs,
right.
Or something like that. So what are some of the signs, like the things that we don't see, we don't know because we're in it? Like, how do we deal with that when we're in this thing? Again, it's fine after the fact, because I feel a lot of your story, you're saying, hey, after the fact, I was deep into this thing.
Right.
But when you're in it, you don't know how deep you're in it because you're a working alcoholic. Like, we have those in our family. They get up and they go to work every day. But on the weekend, they're dead to the world.
Right.
But Monday morning, they're up and they're at work. You know what I mean? And they don't see that it's a problem because it's their coping mechanism to deal with whatever things that they have going on. So how, we can't fix it. We've talked about that already, but how do we begin to have that conversation? How do we get to those future questions that you're talking about? How do we get to those what if questions with them?
Especially if it's hard.
Because it's someone so close to us.
Right.
It's our family members. So how do we do that? How do we begin that conversation?
Yeah, look, and I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, I think the problem is it's hard to have that conversation without that person feeling judged. And so, when we think about the what if question, so the reason why I wrote this book is because what I realized is that most of us use what if to look backwards. Right? So, well, what if I hadn't gotten married at this young age? What if I had gone to college instead of dropped out? And so almost all backward looking what ifs are full of regret. But what if, when you, either for yourself or when you're with someone, when you look at the what if, what you're doing is looking forward with a different perspective. And so I wouldn't probably say, well, you shouldn't drink so much, but I might have a conversation that says, well, what if maybe on Saturday we chose to do something alcohol free? And while they're going to get defensive, but one of the things that what I found with the beautiful thing about the what if is, what if comes across so without judgment, because what if gives that other person the opportunity to just opt out.
Yeah.
No thanks. Okay. Well, even if someone doesn't opt in, the message still gets sent. And so we use what if as just, again, is to be able to find different perspectives and different options. And I think when that person, One of the things when I went to write this book, one of the things I tried to do was, as I've gotten up here in age, is try to look back and say, well, all these things where change and growth happened to me, both big and small. What happened? And so one of the things is what I realized is, right, there's this interruption, right? It breaks it. And then what we have to do is when it interrupts, it allows us to do a different perspective.
Right.
And what if, and that to me is what if. So in this particular, I think let's also say, right, that person you described, right, they're functional, but are they a functional alcoholic or are they a functional heavier drinker? And I think there's a difference. And again, I'm not necessarily a alcohol counselor. Right. But some people drink heavy when they drink, but then other times they don't. But alcohol can still get in their way.
Yeah.
Even if they're not alcoholic.
Right.
And I think, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, that something catastrophic or something, happens in life that creates a change. And it gives you, when that happens, that gives you the what if. What if I continue to go down this path and continue to live the life that I was leading that led to this? Or what if I make a change? Is there, some benefit going to happen? And yeah, that happens a lot in our lives where something happens and it makes us have that question that comes through, that what if I continue and what if I don't? And sometimes we make the right choice and sometimes we don't. And I think a lot of it can depend upon the support that we have with it. Sometimes we don't have that support that helps us continue down the straight and narrow, to not fall off the wagon, if you will. And that's hard to make that change yourself, but then to know that, hey, all my drinking buddies are going to support me on this, or my family members are not going to continue to judge me because I used to be a drug addict or use drugs, and they always question what I was doing with my money. And now, they still question it because they knew the person that I once was. And that's, something that's very challenging, not only for that person, but for all those that are around them. So I think the support needs some assistance as well. So what would you say to those of us that are in that support, figure?
Well, I think one of the things that I've really come to learn is that as humans, we don't want to move forward until we really feel like we can see the total outcome. And one of the things I've discovered in life is that action creates clarity. It's not the other way around. And so it's about getting someone to take some kind of action. And even with ourselves, I mean, we have to, we're worried about somebody. We want to start to have that first step. We want to do something, but we're not exactly what to do. Sometimes it's just sitting down with a person and just starting that very uncomfortable conversation. Again, I think the key is to keep the conversation forward focused, because if you look backwards, it's going to come across as judgment, and then they get defensive, and you don't break through with any defensiveness.
So I'm a back up a little bit based off a little bit of what you just stated, but something you had said earlier that really touched me. So we're talking about action, taking action one way or another, right? Acknowledging, having a conversation, whatever it might be, hitting the pole, whatever it might be. But there's something that you had mentioned. You said opting out versus opting in. And sometimes we don't understand what the difference is between the two. It sounds like the same on the surface, but it really is not. So can you please explain a little bit what that means, opting in versus opting out?
I'm trying to remember. Do you remember the context of how I said it? We have to roll it back.
So I think here's the way I took what you were saying about opting in versus opting out. So up front, if someone asked me, well, what if you were writing down your goals and now you want to get to your point, right? And so I'm going to make a decision like, I'm not going to do that, right? So I'm opting out of that conversation or opting out of that moment. Yeah. But if I say I'm not going to opt in, it still gives me that little breathing room to potentially get to that point. Because I didn't say no up front, but I still bought into the idea a little bit. And so that's how I took what you were stating a few moments ago, of not. I'm not going to give you up front. I'm not going to shoot down your thought. I'm not going to shoot down the idea of that if, because I didn't realize that if could be so powerful until recently. And it could go 1,000 different ways. And so I think that's where I had taken what you were talking about in reference to opting out, because I have already shut it down versus opting in. Now there's possibilities that I might be able to change that mindset.
Right. And yeah. So, right. And in that particular one. And so in the book, I have like 53 weekly questions, and each one starts with, what if this week? Right. And so sometimes, again, as I said, we think we have to just go all in to make change. But sometimes, even in these conversations, maybe we're having a little challenging conversations with loved ones, when we start with kind of a what if, they may choose to opt out, but the seed still gets planted. And so by starting with looking forward and with what if we tried this, they can still say no, but the fact is that it's already been planted, because there's not a defensiveness in their way. And so I think that, and I think the same is true for us, right? That, and I'm just going to pop open to a page.
Sure.
A lot of questions, right? All right. So what if this week you calmly and clearly responded when someone disrespected you? Now, that's pretty hard when you feel disrespected.
Yeah.
Right? But so in this particular one, all I'm asking you is, well, is that something that maybe you can start to consider and start to change? And I think so. The opting in might be is, well, you know what? When my spouse says something in a certain way, it can be, it hurts me, but I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to have a fight, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And instead, what it might be is, there is a way. What if there's a way that I can respond in a calm manner that doesn't do that? And all what if does is opens up this possibilities to just say it's interruption, to be able to say, is there a different way that I can think, act, or react in any given moment? And I think we just have so many more choices than we think so.
I mean, I think that is very key, because sometimes we don't think that we have enough choices. We feel like we're in a box. We feel like that, cat or dog caught up in the corner somewhere, and now we got to claw our way out of that situation because we feel cornered. We don't know how to deal with being in the cage or whatever situation is, and again, backtracking a little bit where you stated, hey, your grandfather, if he would have known what you were doing, again, where we are looking at the rejection, possible rejection, versus he might just say, hey, come on, let's go take a little walk real quick. Let's talk this thing through. So those individuals who are struggling with that think they don't have that support, their fear of rejection, their fear of being stuck in the cage or the corner, and they, what, Doug, I don't have enough choices. I don't think I have enough choices. Where can they find you and talk to you and get your content, your website, and even find out where they can find your book?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we feel like we're stuck in those moments.
Right. Well, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I wanted to get the framework out there. I wanted people to have it. So if they go to the website, startwithwhatif.com, and on there is a link to be able to download a 44-page excerpt that you can put right into your Kindle or PDF, right on your phone. And I'm giving that to you free. And that gives you the entire framework of what I call the what if rule, and how to apply this in your life. And try, so you can get all the content for free. If you'd like to get the entire book, which gives you all 52 questions, also how to apply it in different parts of your life, you can buy it on my website, or you can also get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, and other places that sell books.
Nice. Nice. So, Doug, again, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes.
I appreciate the information that you have shared. And I hope each and every one of you hear that word if.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be that space of regret or whatever it is. It can be something that is forward thinking, forward moving, doesn't have to regress you in the process.
So, Doug, before we end the show, I have one final question for you.
Yes.
Sure.
It's an iffy kind of question, I think. If you could sing a duet with anyone in the world, living or deceased, who would that person be?
I would probably say Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy
Oh,
Buffett.
wow.
Yes. Good.
In particular reason why?
Yeah, I've been a fan of his since the 70s. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's fun nautical music and puts me by the water. And
Mhm.
I would probably, there's a couple songs, heavy drinking songs that I would no longer sing with him, but I love his ballads.
Would you love
and
the
so I
song?
would-
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And let me just say, I do a lot of duets with him. He's just not here. With me.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Yes. Not physically, you do.
I understand that.
Yeah.
The best
I hope nobody has
duets.
to hear that.
I know, right?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe except for the people that live in your household. But,
People walk by on the sidewalks with my headphones.
Yeah.
But we thank you very much, Doug, for coming on to the
Thank
show.
you.
And we thank
Really
y'all very
appreciate it.
much for listening to the No Fruit podcast. But I want to leave you with a challenge. So this week, before you point the finger at your spouse, at your child, or maybe even your circumstances, I just need you to pause. Just pause for a moment and then ask yourself, what if this question about your role in your season that you're in, just write one moment down, just one. I don't need you to write down a whole laundry list, and just sit with it. And then do what you feel like is the next best thing to do in that, to move forward, not to regress, not to get depressed about it, but to move forward. So I thank y'all very much for listening to the No Fruit podcast, and we'll talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the No Fruit podcast, where we bring you fruitful conversations, ripened wisdom, and love that's deeply rooted. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration in their day. Until next time, stay rooted in love, and remember, every seed you plant today shapes the fruit of tomorrow.